Hello, pilots. Welcome back. It is Friday, April 24th, and we are at episode 15 of our weekly YouTube live show. And today we have another fun one. We have a lot of footage that Alpha had shot for us a long time back, or, not too long ago. He takes this footage whenever he can, and, we compile it, go through it, and we wanted to give you guys a little, as much as we can behind the scenes tour without obviously revealing the special sauce, if you will, too much. But, get into the factory a little bit, guys, so you guys can see just how much goes in to the production of some of your favorite aircraft from Freewing and Flightline, because Flightline is a brand from the manufacturer Freewing. So, again, guys, we're here. I just want to see a lot of people in the chat. So, live chat is probably going to get crazy because we're around 400 people here. So, at the end of so the way we're going to break this down, back on episode 5 when we did the painting factory tour, we had broken down about 6 different videos. Smaller videos, Alpha was narrating, and then we're trying to take questions from people live from the chat of each section. So we're going to try to do that. I'm going to look in the comments for questions, but obviously the chat is going to be, firing pretty rapidly. So if you do have any questions about this, you guys can 100% go to Hobby Squawk either after this show. Alpha's always in there and always answering questions and getting behind the scenes. So that's one way you could have, any questions answered about this. But also, before every show, because this isn't the last time we're going to do it, jump on Hobby Squawk beforehand. A few people did, so I have some set questions that I'll be able to ask Alpha, and I think they're very pertinent. Obviously, a lot of this stuff, me personally, I've never seen, so I have a lot of questions myself that I'm going to ask Alpha, because I've never toured a factory yet and seen this stuff go on. I only know what you guys are about to know as far as that goes. But I want to make sure we are joined by Alpha. Alpha, you with us?
Yes, I am.
Yes. And I want to make sure if you guys in the comments, can you hear Alpha? So Alpha, just sing for us or recite a poem so that they can make sure they hear you well.
We're not going to die yet, everyone. Not to worry.
Oh, I see Rich Baker in the chat. I see Skip Built, Farmer Man. I see a lot of Vic, I know, is in there. Jameson. A lot of you guys who join us every week, thank you for coming in. And all you new guys who are joining us, we're doing this every week, and we always try to be informative in some way. But I know this way is going to be a lot of fun. So I think, Alpha, are you ready to go?
Yeah, let's do this.
So do you have anything you want to preface everybody, sort of prepare them, in a way of what they're going to see? Or
just to reinforce what James has said, guys, chat's going to be really live, and so jump into Hobby Squawk, engage us there for deeper types of questions. This is the second in a series of probably, 3, 4, 5, 6 different videos. So we have footage from a variety of our factories. I see some questions in here already, sort of what factory is this? I don't know where you've been, but this is Freewing. This is one of our factory partners. We've got Balsa, we've got Bancroft warships, we've got Henlong tanks, and a variety of different things, Robon helicopters, and rotor scale as well. So if this type of thing is what people would like to see, by all means, let us know in Hobby Squawk what factories you'd like to see later, and we can take a look at showing a bit behind the curtain. That's at least the goal in all this. So.
You rarely see this from any company, and it's exciting to be able to do this kind of content, because as I can see, 462 viewers in here. Last week, we didn't quite have that many. So when you tell people they're getting behind the scenes, obviously people want to see this. So, we're happy to bring it to you, and we're excited, to get started. So again, here is the first clip. This will be again, the first process of a factory tour. Now, I know some people had said I saw questions like, oh, what's this virtual tour or a live tour? It is 12 a.m. over there right now where the factory would be. So that was never going to happen, a live tour. And internet capability is not always the best, when you're streaming in that way. Maybe one day we'll be able to do an actual live tour, but it was always going to be in the same vein as the painting show we did about now 10 weeks back, episode 5. So
we're excited. It's been a while. I think what I'm seeing in the comments already, a lot of great questions. I think overall people love the idea of seeing where their hobby sort of originates. And the hope in this series, guys, is that people can see a little bit. This is frankly still only the tip of the iceberg between the How It's Made article that we've got on the motionrc.com knowledge blog that I wrote that was published in the Model Aviation magazine last April, to these sequences of videos, to the types of engagement we try to give people on hobbysquawk.com and the forums there. It's all still tip of the iceberg. Some of the questions: how many people work there? How many planes do we sell? What are we making next? We hope people understand we can't show you that, but we're going to dive into this first section. And as a refresher course, this is sort of after ideation. This is after we've done the market analysis. This is after we've listened to customers on Hobby Squawk as far as what aircraft they want to make. This is after we've assessed our own portfolio, recognizing that these are six-figure investments. What do we want to have sort of come next? This first clip, we're joining that process around month 12, month 14, month 15. So let's dive into it.
Let's dive into it. And Alpha, you are our Samuel Jackson or Morgan Freeman narrator. So here we go. You guys ready? Starting out.
All right. So we begin as always with the customer wall. Anyone who gives us pictures on Hobby Squawk, you're liable to be put up on this wall. Important because the workers are frequently trained on how aircraft work and the customers that are flying them. We're going to jump in first with a look at a plastic mold factory. These molds are created out of various materials, but essentially they're very large, ranging from a couple 100 pounds to a couple thousand. And we're going to take a look at the two different types of molds that we use. So here we get a good look at a CNC machine. That is CNC machining a large slab for a wing for one of our aircraft. This process, because it is so slow, can typically take weeks to complete. So a given molded aircraft is going to have several sets of molds. This is a good shot of CNCing a wing there. I actually put this up on Instagram at Instagram. Alpha.makes is my Instagram, where we posted a bit of a teaser of this video. And other types of ways to make the mold include CNC finishing, as we saw, EDM, and this is in fact a copper mold for what ends up being the cheater hole in an L39. This is a look at the back of a mold. All those pipes and whatnot, all those armatures are intended to draw in liquefied foam and then position them. This is where the finished result is in the context of a plastic injection mold. You can then pull that little plastic piece out. Obviously, to maintain production as we do, we have several CNC machines.
So now I'm going to the pictures real quick, Alpha. So I screenshotted, guys, what you see. I can't start and stop a video as it goes. So, I played it out. But now I have the ability to swap the pictures so we could get, we could pause because a lot of that went by really fast. And I get it. And Alpha's, doing his best. So take us back to this first picture. This was the first one that jumped out to me. What am I looking at?
So this is the bed of one of our CNC machines. This is about the size of a coffin. It's just to use a rough sort of visual space in our heads. Long, tall, wide. It's a very large bed in the machinist world. And it needs to be, because when we think in terms of, I saw a question earlier in the comments, how large are these molds? We'll get to that in a couple of these future clips, but these molds are molded in machines that are 10 to 12 feet tall, 10 feet or so deep, and about 8 feet wide. Each individual mold frame is going to vary. The smaller plastic molds will be about the dimension of a large sort of cowboy boot box. Aircraft will be obviously the 737, the A10, for example, would be as long as that fuselage is. So you can sort of look at your aircraft and imagine.
So these are mold plates that you're seeing on the screen?
Yeah,
Okay.
these are sort of a variety of different mold plates that we're prepping for insertion into the mold frame.
Whoa.
Just, just plain crazy. What do we do with molds when you retire a plane? We don't retire planes, or at least we try not to. What you're looking at
Yeah.
here is swarf, word of the day, everyone. So swarf is the name for all of the shavings, the metal shavings that are milled out of the original billet of metal. And swarf obviously is it's still good. It's just full of lubricant, and so that's all recycled.
That
Yeah,
gets washed off, melted down, and brought back as a new
exactly.
plate.
Yeah,
Nice.
exactly. Yeah. So this I like this shot here. This shows you a bit of the back of one of these plastic molds. These are alignment pins, and alignment holes that allow the mold to be perfectly aligned and then also obviously to allow that liquid media to be inserted and injected into the mold. So
Now, are
when
those
people think
different?
of
If this one's being used for two different things, that's why all these these don't look even. These holes on the left here, they look
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
So they
they're
like
not.
reuse them. Nice.
Yeah, well, no, in that case, this plate is for the same mold. Once you make a mold, that mold doesn't deviate or vary in any way. It will get into
Okay.
a longer discussion about sort of what a mold is, but suffice to say, what we wanted to show here, guys, is that these are think of how your aircraft is made. Look at that AL-37 all the way down to a small 64 millimeter jet. Try to imagine what is making that? You have two sides of a mold, a male and a female. There's a gap in between them. That's the cavity into which foam will flow, or plastic. Um, Here we see another one of our CNC machines. And yes, Victor, our CNC machines are fully automated. That's the
They're like 3D
definition of
printers in a
CNC.
way, right? You pop it,
Yeah,
so you design it in the computer. Now, just getting to this process could be a whole nother video because obviously you're not going to start this mold until it has to be perfect, right? Because if you mess up this part, if you said it takes weeks to produce this mold, then your boss is going to be upset. You know.
exactly, exactly. And to Tom Callahan's question, yes, we obviously have multiple molds. So a given aircraft will have a couple of sets, and yeah. To Vic's question, yes, everything's CNC, computer numerical control. So everything is automated. We design the aircraft, and we fly them. Again, you're going to need to go to Hobby Squawk or read those knowledge blog articles to see that process in months 0 through 12. By the time we've reached this point, by the time we're molding an aircraft, um, suffice to say, we've already flown the prototype over 200 times. We've already done all of the mathematical calculations to ensure the aircraft is going to fly right. Because once you crack a mold, as we say, and begin to make them, there's really no turning back. Uh, you
Yeah.
have to know that aircraft is gonna fly and is gonna fly well.
And I think this
Uh,
caters to the point too, whereas guys, when you see a lot of I see those questions a lot, like people say, "Oh, it looks like they use the same X, from that plane for this plane." It's like
yeah,
now
you
you
don't
understand why. Like you want to get as much out of a mold as you can. So sometimes you
exactly.
got to take some liberties on a scale, on scale to fit the price point. I mean, we all
Absolutely,
want to fly our aircraft, a good flying aircraft at a right price point, and sometimes like you're not going to get all the scare features. We're not making scale models as much as we're making great flying models. That's the most important, right? So
absolutely, and ultimately the designs guys are again, if you want us to go more into month 0 through 12, we can do that on a latter episode. But suffice to say, just to answer some of the questions here, yes, the prototypes are CNC machined out of a different type of foam. They're not scratch built. They need to be precise. So they are CNC'd to our specifications, but it's a reductive process. You're removing the outside of the foam. By the time you're making a mold, as we see here, that's an additive process where we're injecting foam into the mold.
yeah, I want to
Maybe
get back
get
to
through a
this
couple of
picture.
questions here. Uh, yeah, we see some of the ejection pins and the other parts behind that mold. And again, when we think of an aircraft, guys, the adage it's a foamy plane, it's a foam electric. You got to consider that the aircraft, the aircraft you're looking at, again, I like to use the A-10 as an example. There are over 50 suppliers, over 400 parts that comprise that aircraft. The wing itself is actually 6 different pieces of foam per side. It's got plastic, carbon, aluminum, plywood, nylon, brass. There's many different materials. The plastic needs to be molded separately. What we're looking at here is a special
I
machine
went away
that
from it. I'm
that
coming
that,
back.
that
There we go.
removes material very slowly, suffice to say. Um,
Yep.
and and then even the mold, let's say a fuselage, it's not just a mold for one half. There's a question here about, can we get one airplane out of one shot? You can't. The A-10, you have a left wing mold, a right wing mold, a fuselage mold with different parts sort of scattered within that mold. We get a common question of, can't you just make this small little part for me? Well, no, because that small little part is is situated among a sea of other smaller parts in a large mold, bigger than a poster. So you you would need to go shoot that mold to get that one
And
little.
we'll get to the bigger molds. Don't maybe jump ahead. Let me drop the second video because it's very similar to what we just saw. So we're still on the plastic molds.
Yeah,
We'll
let's
get to
let's
the bigger parts, but so guys, check these out. So these are all different plastic molds. So these are going to be like spinners, right? And
right.
machine guns
Spinners, yeah,
and
hubs, and again, every aircraft, they're unique, except for things like the wheel hub. Everything else is unique. So here we
and
see
look at this. You
pause.
can't even pick it up. It looks small. Like I was like, oh, can I grab that? And Alpha's telling
Yeah,
me it's 300 pounds. That's crazy. And look
yeah,
at all the
exactly.
molds. That's
They're
like
they're they're really heavy. We have, I mean, quite literally at this point, thousands. That little bit right there, that entire mold for that sort of size piece is just for the plastic receiver that is molded into the wing or then glued into the wing of the 1.6 meter Spitfire to hold the little plastic cannons that you pop in there. So all of
wow.
that effort to prevent someone from needing to glue it in, but now you can slide in that cannon. You need a plastic receiver tube, and so you need to make a mold. So when we talk, guys, about costs and controlling costs, more plastic, more doors, new pilots for every new aircraft, it's really not something that can be done, at least smartly. So, while Bill,
Yeah, and
we can't really answer how many pieces per hour. That gets a bit more into
the
more
special
the business.
sauce.
Yeah, that's the special sauce. Suffice to say, I'd say we were one of the more prolific producers. So
But I
the
would say
answer
like
is a lot.
looking at this shot, and I just think of the coordination it takes. So he's pulling out, one mold that's probably for one plane. So the foam person that might say, all right, we're making Flightline Spitfires, they're pumping out the foam part. This guy's got to pump out the same amount of the plastic parts. Then the other manufacturer for the landing gear, the metal ones, and it's
Yeah,
all got to
this gets
come
into a great
together.
question that
It's
Brooklyn born. You had a good question there. How much more would it cost to manufacture in? You asked the USA, but I'm just going to say to manufacture anywhere but where we make it. And the answer is really the same. It's 10x. The reason why is exactly as James just said. It's not just making the airplane. You need to have those 50 other suppliers who are laser cutting wood and CNCing aluminum struts and producing electronics and wiring and developing the LEDs and making molds for plastic and making molds for foam because those are 2 different enterprises. An EDM machine, plastic injection molding, foam molding, the foam mold creators. Those are all different industries. And so,
yeah.
far be it from us to be able to say it isn't so simple as saying we want to move a factory into any other country. Where we're situated geographically, I have access to 50 plus companies, suppliers in our supply chain within an hour or so. So the density of all that, that's why Apple is sort of next door and all of those sorts of things. So where we can move some of these industries, Reckham, I know you're in the chat, and absolutely, you worked at a plastic injection molding facility. You know, the day that we have that next door to your factory is an EDM guy, next to your guy is a foam electric guy, and we have legislation and regulation that allows for the use of these types of things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we can sort of have those conversations. So call your
Yeah.
congressman.
Yeah, and it's like again, yeah, Freewing doesn't make every single bit that's on, their planes. You need to, like anything else, like your car, like everything.
Yeah, Tom,
The
that's an
amount
EDM
of
machine.
it's
Tom's
incredible.
asking, that's an EDM machine. It's too much to dive into now, but suffice to say, specialty machine, very cool. Let's dive into the next clip.
All right, next clip. Here we go. You guys ready? We just getting started. Here we go. Big machine. I think this is our
Yeah,
phone,
so
right?
after we've made
There it is.
molds,
Look at that
now we
piece.
need to actually shoot the mold. Bezermutt, the AL37 isn't equipped with rush reversers because it doesn't need to be. So this is a good shot of one of the molding machines. Again, you need factories worth of these machines. You can't sustain production with just one. You're going to need about 20 of these. These machines are 10 to 12 feet tall, large, computer operated gantries. Most of our machines are German. And here we see adding
EPO.
EPO
There it
pellets.
is.
Yeah, so
There it is.
there's a bit of a secret sauce in terms of what type of foam you use, and there are ratios and percentages. Someone had asked earlier about the recipe. Yes, there's a recipe of temperature and time and sort of what media you're using. So all of that is catered to a specific aircraft. There's actually a lot of variability between different aircraft. The A10, again, is a good example, has two different types of foams in it, two different sort of ratings of foam. Some of them are oily, some of them are stronger, et cetera, et cetera. But here you get a good look at sort of foam being injected. This is before it's melted, before it's liquefied, for lack of a better
Wow.
term. We take all these pellets in there, and they're then injected in between the mold. Now, this woman you
And there
see
she
here,
is,
yeah, there
pulling
she is.
out the final piece.
So there are dozens of workers on the mold extraction team. This is all they do. They need at least 7 to 8 years of mold extraction experience because, as you can see, every piece. This is an L39 fuselage mold, and in that same mold frame, we've got a few other pieces. Because again, that fuselage is comprised of 20 different jigsaw pieces of foam. It's not one. So she needs to remove each of these pieces by hand every single time. So when people say there's a thumbprint in my foam, well, over 100
Hey, you're
hands.
stealing my line.
Yeah. So
That's what
I'm,
I
I'm
said
taking
yesterday.
James's line. Yeah, over 100 aircraft, over 100 hands will touch your aircraft before it reaches you. So um, if she goes in there, obviously she's sanitized before she enters the machine and then sanitized on her way out. The mold as well is sanitized in between each shot because there's a lot of oil on our hands, on human hands. There's a lot of sort of different types of things.
So
There's a
now I'm at the
question
pictures. Here's the screenshots of the video. We just saw that video played through, so
yeah,
go get to your question, Alpha. By all means,
exactly.
if you saw a
I
question.
noticed in the comments someone's asking, does the worker touch the material without any protection? Again, guys, some of these photos when you see people in there, these were sort of these are staged. Um, we turn the machine off for security purposes when someone's standing in there and we're taking video. So,
Yeah,
uh,
and
no,
this wasn't shot during coronavirus outbreak. Like it's a whole
yeah,
different story.
yeah. I think G. Thomas, he was probably asking about is the worker touching the material, and again, that's when we're talking about those are different types of conditions under which we're shooting a full production. But yes, a
Yeah.
rectum, she does climb into the mold, as you can see. The mold is a frame of two different halves. So if we pause on this picture here, pause on that one, James.
With her, there we go.
Pause on
Behind
that.
her is the other side, right?
Yeah. So what you see, those big chrome bars,
Or this one.
those are essentially that's a good picture. So what we see
Yeah.
there is you see one half of the mold frame. Then there's another half. There's about 4 or 5 feet in between them. So the worker will go in the middle, pull the parts out, prep the mold again, resanitize. Uh, leave the machine then closes. There's a gating system that closes. Obviously, for safety, we can actually see on the upper left part of the system that ensures that the machine cannot arm until that gate is closed. I mean, guys, again, we
Gotcha.
didn't invent this technology. This is decades old tech.
Oh yeah.
This is a German machine. There's a lot of safety features in there so that you're not going to have pressurization or injection happening when the molds are open. Only when she's out, there's no weight on the floor, and the gates are physically closed and touching each other, can the system arm, and then it recycles. So we'll
Look how
go,
big that is.
yeah,
I mean, it's a
it,
door panel. It's like, a big barn door is the mold for just that plane. And man,
yeah,
that definitely limits how, I guess how big you'd want to make your foamy, planes. I mean, that's a
yeah,
lot of, that's unbelievable. It's so cool to see this. I'm glad people are getting a
yeah.
chance to see this. I'm glad we're doing this. I'm like giddy about this show today. Uh, really,
Yeah, Tim.
really.
I also like to see, people like George and Reckham and Tim in the comments, people who've worked at OSHA, people who are in the injection molding business. You all sort of know just how different this stuff is, um, from sort of what I think people conventionally imagine when they look at their airplane and say, "Huh, how do they make that?"
Yeah,
Or
but I can.
surely it's 50 cents an hour, and then people just sort of cobble these things together. We're hoping in this series that people sort of understand that it's more. I can't
Create
it
an
would take
educated customer base, so you guys can really
exactly.
see that, you know, this is no joke. It's a big, big
Yeah,
business.
exactly. Inert FPV's got a great question in here while we run this clip again. Does a lot of the staff fly the products? If you're talking about Motion RC, certainly most all of us fly. If you're talking about
Yep.
the factories differ in China. Some of them have a lot of avid flyers. Some of them don't. Our battery factory chain, they're not really RC airplane pilots. A lot of them actually like drones. Our helicopter factories, the airplane factories, certainly the more successful ones like Freewing, absolutely. The engineers are all pilots, and increasingly a lot of the team leaders, people who specialize in decals, at least one of those decal people, we've taught them how to fly over the past few years. At least
Wow.
the team leader for the packing or for the foam extraction, a lot of them learn how to fly, or at the very least, we have sort of bi-weekly training where we'll show them our videos, we'll show them your pictures so that people can get a sense of the connection between what they're doing and how they're eventually being used.
That's awesome. And that's awesome. And Dennis Farley actually had a great question. And I think you could answer the quick, but you don't use the same type of foam you use the same type of foam on your prototype as the final production. But I believe you had told me once, like, you can't use this foam, you can't use the same mold with a different type of foam. Like, could you inject
Correct.
the
Nope.
L39 with EPS or with
You
EPP?
can't. Yeah,
You
you
can.
can't.
Yeah. So I hope that answers your question, Dennis. Like, yeah, obviously you're making a prototype. You're going to do it in the, you know, in where it goes. Alpha, you there?
I am.
Oh, he is here. All right, he's still here. All right, so we're back to me, and I say we move on. That was
Let's jump
only
in.
vid 3, so we got some time. What's the next one? I'm forgetting now. So, roll tape.
Okay, so this is after they've been molded. There's a stack of F-18s there. The foam needs to dry, and so we air dry and pressure dry as well. And then here you see just rows and rows of of molded parts. There are thousands a day that we'll really need to generate, from small little pitot tubes to fuselage subassemblies, burner cones, canopies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a sterilization process that happens when the parts are handled post mold. At a certain point, though, they just go on these large drying racks. Um, so you get a
Wow.
good sense of sort of, the space you need.
Yeah, man,
uh,
guys, when I'll replay this video again right after before I get to the pictures, but start trying to call out some of the planes if you can make them out. That's the first thing I tried to do.
Yeah, so you need a large operation. This is actually, I think I shot this on riding my hoverboard, my Segway. Um, but these facilities are sort of Walmart sized. Now we move. We've seen a bit of this in episode 5. If not, everyone go back and watch that episode where we do a painting tutorial, walkthrough. And this is where all that foam is then transported to a different element of our factory supply chain, which is painting. So each of those subcomponents need to be painted, not just with primer or the base, but also any ancillary colors, any supportive
Look at all the
camo
paint
colors,
booths.
etc. Yeah.
Every paint booth back there, somebody's doing it. Like, there's so much manual labor that goes into it. I think a lot
Right.
of people get confused and they think, oh, a machine is spitting these things out. And it's like, man, no.
Yeah, no, no. Now you have the transporters from one station to another, from one building to another, and then once they're handled, you need to paint every single individual piece. Um, so it's quite an operation. The painting guys, especially, I think I saw a question in there. Uh, these people don't move between different operations. If you're think of an auto worker, if you're the wheel guy, you're not the paint guy, you're the
Yeah.
wheel guy. And so these teams have really become specialized over the years. The notion that someone is going to walk into my factory and start making an F-14 the next day, it's just it makes me laugh anytime I see that implication, because it's absolutely not the case. Um, we're in an area where you can sort of pick and choose and actually have a competitive market for finding people with injection mold experience or with painting experience in the production world. People from any big brand that you can think of. Um, People sort of make this a career. They like what they do. There's a certain finesse about how they do it, and we really try to drive and find people who are experts in their fields. Reckham, no, the cost of living in China. I'd encourage anyone Google the cost of living in Shenzhen, China. It is, it's it's probably higher than half of America, if not more. I used to live in Los Angeles, California. My rent in China is just as high as it was in LA. So again, I think a lot of a lot of our concept of what China, Vietnam, South Korea, Japan, what those countries were 10 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, it's it's different. They've changed. Things are expensive. Things are complex, and we benefit from both of those types of schema in the sense that it's complex, it's fully mature. People sort of know what they're doing now. Paul Broyles asks, "Do we allow visitors to the factory?" Again, of the sort of 50 or 55 that's going to be involved in a Freewing production, I'd probably take someone to one of them. I mean, most of this stuff is proprietary. We show we show everyone the tip of the iceberg. Yes, Reckham. No one's making
Yeah.
50 cents an hour here. I think everyone would be surprised when they learned what workers make. So it's by
Like
far
any
not a
business,
financial decision.
think
And
about their business too. They're hiring people. You're training them up to do things. You don't want to lose that person, for any reason. Like any company, like you start somebody. Sometimes the best thing when you hire someone, they have no experience. You build them up. You want to
yeah,
keep them. You want to keep them right. And why would that change
absolutely,
anywhere in the world for any
absolutely.
business?
Craft King, then why not move to the USA again, guys? Scroll back in the video. It's not a financial decision alone. There are far more reasons and limitations. Some from the business side in Asia, some from frankly the American legislation side that don't really not too friendly. But again, call your
Yeah, we could have a
congressman. Tell
whole
them,
we could have a whole show
yeah,
about that. But
that's a
if
different
somebody wanted
conversation.
to,
Um,
if we could
I
get an
would love
investor
to
to
do
do
it,
it, we would
but
love to distribute products as well,
yes,
like from
but it's
there. Who
it, but
wouldn't?
it's not a purely a financial thing. You're gonna need to call your congressman and tell them, I want an RC store here. I
Yeah.
want a factory base here, and we would be the first ones in that line, by the way. Um, so
Yeah.
that's why it's not the same cost. We're talking tip of the iceberg, one
And
different element. You're right, Michael.
one
The
thing,
EPA. Yeah.
one thing I was gonna
Um,
say when you said earlier, as you're talking, you laugh when people say, "Why didn't they do this?" Like, This is the video I hope everybody that we can now point to when you see those comments come through social media. Oh, they should have did this. They should have did this with the plane. It's so easy to do. Take them back to this. Like there's a lot of work. It's not like they're just throwing things to the wall. Like, they're calculated decisions, and there's a cost risk, analysis being done on every single piece. Like, this is just the 64 millimeter A10, and you look around it and you're like, man, everything on it had a huge decision to be made. It's incredible. It's incredible. I'm so glad to finally do this show. So anyway, back to you, Alpha.
Yeah, just running through a couple questions here. So what glue is used? There are different types of adhesives used for different materials. If you're bonding foam to plastic, wood to foam, suffice to say, we try and use the correct material for the mission. The amount, I know, is always if we ever get the amount wrong, it's one of the first things we hear about. So as far as, EPA, guys, I mean, again, we don't really want to dive into this, the political nature of it all. Suffice to say, for anyone wondering, you can find out. We hope that this show gives you a primer and sort of a sense of just how complex this business is. That's really the goal here. As far as how complex is it to change or to move or to make an airplane that doesn't have paint for one guy who wants one, we hope that if this episode series does anything, it's just to underscore the fact that imagine that this is just however large you think this operation is, it's larger. However complex you think it is, it's more complex.
I just saw comparing Apple manufacturing to Freewing. Can you imagine what Apple does? Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
we're just making foam airplanes.
Let's not do that. This is about airplanes. So let's move on to the next.
Let's move on to the next video. Yes. Oh, this is going to be a shorter video. This was stemming off the paint. This is like all those paint molds that we didn't show in the last time. So this video actually will replay. Guys, when you see it loop, it automatically loops the video. I have a few pictures here, but this one goes quick, so, Alpha can...
Yeah, so these are molds. These are paint molds. Eric Rollerson, all props and EDFs are balanced, not randomly. They're all go through the setup. But when we get into painting molds and sort of using those molds, I like this type of stuff. We're just going to loop this video to give you guys sort of a better look at these. We cover this in better depth in episode 5. So again, I'd encourage you to go back and check that out, or jump into Hobby Squawk. You can see sort of still photos of what this looks like. These molds are conformal molds that conform to the surface of the outside of the foam. They're made of copper, which is expensive, and they need to go into every panel line, every curve, every angle on that foam. So they lay over. These essentially, we call them molds, but in this context, they're really more functioning like masks. These are, you hold them over a given part of foam, paint over them, and the exposed area gets the paint you shot, and the area that was covered does not.
Actually,
so when people,
this
is a great question when people ask about, we call them molds in Chinese, but they are, as I mentioned, they're functioning as masks. So here you get a sense of the F-35. Due to the size of that mold, the upper fuselage needs 4 different paint masks. Each one the same size, but the holes in them are different, and they need to align. And so the paint work is probably more the things we're known for. And in fact, our more experienced teams are typically the paint men. I mean, these guys are a minimum of 10 years painting experience. Some of them, the team leaders, are up towards 20 or 30 years, and all they have ever done is paint. This is their career. These are career men who've chosen to sort of do this and are good at what they do. Why do we use copper, Skip? Because it's malleable. When you look, guys, look at your aircraft. We're sort of known for really thin panel lines at Freewing. 1.5 millimeters wide and 1 millimeter deep. We need a copper paint mask to conform into those little panel lines so that the paint doesn't sort of do overspray. So you can't use sort of tin, or certainly not steel. So you want a soft, malleable metal. Copper is sort of what it needs to be. So here you see, just as I'm yapping here, you see we've got the axes of one line going one way. He needs to drop another paint mask over here that's going the another way. There's obviously a worker off screen who takes that mold in between each shot, and he'll prep and clean it so that wet paint doesn't get onto the aircraft again. So um, that entire process of painting and prepping these models answers, I hope, the question for people who say, why don't you make 5 different color schemes, or why can't you just do this, or I want this or that? Guys, this is a when you ask for something, you have to know that I'm asking myself, are there 1,000 other people like him? Are there 5,000 other people like him? Because if the answer is maybe or no, it's, you know, we're not worth it to anyone if we're dead. So we try to make good, smart decisions as part of how to grow. And I'm hoping you guys are beginning to see, this is not a small operation. Not very easy to change. People had questions also about primer on the AL37. This is a great question. Um, Paint is not obviously made equally. People ask, can you mix colors? Sometimes the paint on certain models adheres better. With some models, with the AL37, I believe, we did have a small batch that didn't have good adhesion. Part of that was due to the prep and our deeper looks. Part of that is also, actually, most of that is due, in fact, to the type of paint that is used. Increasingly, the Chinese government, and I'm all for it, actually, their EPA is moving towards safer paints. And so what that means is water-based. They're moving away from oil-based. The one so great for the environment, great for workers' health, great for long-term sort of use. The one disadvantage is it's less its adhesion properties are a bit less. And so we're in a transition period with certain colors, white being one of them, um, where where the safer paint, the more environmentally friendly paint, and the more commercially now available paint is not so friendly with foam. So we had a decision to make. We could have not painted it at all, which there are other models on the market that are all white that we've got and other manufacturers got that are not painted. For the AL37, we really felt it needed to be painted. So since then, the other improvements have been made. And again, in the context of this operation, when we see a couple people sort of say, I had a problem with that airplane, you got to remember you're one of thousands. So
Yeah. And
in a
around the world, remember,
statistical sense, yeah, around the world, guys.
Motion
In a
RC is not the
statistical
only
sense,
distributor of Freewing, around the world.
yeah,
There are other great distributors. We just happen to be exclusive in EU and US.
yeah.
But,
Light burner, why don't we
Freewing,
use a primer? Again, if the EPA says you can't use super durable enamel primers, then you can't use a primer. So, points for the environment. Downside is use a post-it when you're masking off paint in your aircraft. Don't use masking tape. Masking tape has too high of a tack and will pull up some colors of paint. So
yeah. So that was that vid show 5, I think. Let me just check real
you're
quick
right.
with my pictures.
You're right.
Yeah, that was the
Joker Thorne.
masking one.
By
So
the way,
we're
guys,
on.
we'll take a quick pause here because we notice there are a lot of people in chat, a lot of people watching. We're at the 45-minute mark. We're definitely gonna go long. I don't think
Yeah.
anyone's gonna mind, but take a moment, click like. Um, Later on when the
Yes.
video goes live, jump into the comments here so that people can sort of,
It's
let us
down.
know if you like this stuff.
It's down here. It would be right there. There's a like button. I hate telling people to hit the like button.
I will.
I'm not that type of person. Alpha can do it. I just,
Like the like
but
button.
it does help,
It
guys.
maybe.
And I think if anything, this is the type of video that benefits all of our hobby. You know what I mean? Like, I hope you realize that other companies are doing similar types
Yeah.
of things. Like they're working hard as well to bring you products. So, if anything, it's a crime there aren't more. Let's get more people out to fields, being outside and flying, everything, because how awesome is this hobby, just in general?
Exactly.
The perfect hobby for the future quarantines we might have to be in. Get prepped now, because
F900, I'm not going to tell you our product pipeline for 2020. Sorry, buddy.
yeah, no, nobody's getting product pipeline information.
H. Smith 9100, how much pressure is used? It depends. I'm going to talk about this real quick, James, actually, because this is probably important. Guys, the recipe for foam is proprietary and it varies. It varies per aircraft. If you got to imagine injecting peanut butter into a mold, if you have a large mold, and there's a lot of space in between in that mold, you can shove peanut butter at a different viscosity into that mold than you can if there was a small gap between them. So, uh, my point in saying that is you have to imagine that there are technicians whose their entire career they run the math on, can we get this volume of material into these curving complex shapes and spaces, um, quickly enough to where they don't quickly enough to where they fill all the different cavities and are able to fill that mold and render sharply the panel lines, for example, that we're looking at on this F-35, but also not take too long to the point where the foam is burning. So pressure, heat, and time, those different functions are all baked into a mold engineering technician. Ejection pin placement, uh, ejector pin placement, all of those types of things are sort of that's an entire industry I could talk for hours about as far as how we advantage and leverage technologies and expertise that are used, as James said, for almost every other foam electric RC manufacturer, and basically anything that's ever been molded in your house. Take a look around yourself for a moment. All of those types of things are sort of driven and informed by an engineering base that we take advantage of too. So I want to be clear, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're just trying to be a bit smarter of how it's used and bring that level of sophistication into the hobby. Um, TXTH has asked, do you recycle the excess foam the workers are trimming out?
I don't think you
You
can,
know,
right?
yeah, you can't recycle it in a classical sense, in that you can't restore an expanded polyethylene ball back to an unexpanded state. But we quote unquote recycle them in the sense that there's a secondary market for chopped up foam. They'll use
Yep.
it as padding. So obviously we're not going to want to throw it away. In fact, we're regulated not to just toss that type of stuff. So the short
One thing I
answer
had to
is
ask,
it does have a second life. It's just not
is there
in.
a mold for the box that the plane comes in to inject that foam?
There
Like
is, yes.
there
Anyone who's
like so
looked
there's
at
a
our
hole next to it just to package your plane. The stuff you crack and toss is getting just as much work as what you fly.
Tony,
Unbelievable.
yeah. So there's that. I'm glad you brought that up. So the two guys who build and sort of engineer the foam box, different factory that does that because it's a different type of foam. And yes, that specialist who worked at Freewing, his one job is to
Here, I'll play that
fit
video again
all of
while you
these
talk.
different pieces, the landing gear and all the small baggies of parts you get in there, to take all of that and be able to fit
There
it
it
in a
is.
box that we can ship. Motion RC ships for free to a lot of parts, to a majority of our current customer base, and we need to be conscious of shipping costs. We do damage testing. He looks at, we can make the box small, but it won't be strong enough. It's going to arrive with dented parts. And so all of that sort of, again, math is baked into how do we make that foam carrier that most of us probably toss a few seconds after opening the box. So you're right, Jansen. I like I like whenever people notice the box because it is not easy.
I
um,
always notice the box, even just fitting your plane. Have you ever tried to take your plane apart and put it back in the box? That's like sometimes
yeah.
it's hard to do that because you forget how it came out. Like I did that with
Or
Alex a few times. We film it and I go back and look at the video we filmed of how it pulled it out to you know,
yeah.
the boxes are great for transporting certain aircraft that aren't that hard to assemble. The glueless ones anyway.
Yeah. War Buzzard asked, when will we get Oleo gear struts? We've used Oleo gear struts. The RC plane industry has had suspension struts for a very long time. You
Yeah,
mentioned oil
that's a long
shocks in
question.
RC cars. Again, when you deal with the mechanics of a shock and the advantage of a spring leverage system versus an oil shock and its dampening and whatnot, there's a reason why I'll say even turbine RC planes don't use oil shocks. The advantages aren't necessarily there. We can
Yeah.
get the same type of absorption that we want, and bounce back as we want using classical springs. So that's
Um,
why.
RC Gear Yak 54. How do you paint all the planes the exact same with the decal? We just showed that. We have a lot of copper molds, but also we have a whole episode dedicated to painting of planes. It was in our live. There's a playlist for all of our live shows. They will replay forever. They will live there forever. It's episode 5, I believe, if you really want to see.
Yeah, you
Alpha
want to
was there
check out
talking
episode
about
5.
that, all that. So,
Yeah,
but I showed a little bit
crafting,
before
the,
if you just jumped in.
Yeah,
but I got 2
crafting-
more videos to show.
The box is not EPS. It's not hot wire easy enough. I mean, again, take a look at some of our boxes, and they are conformal cradles that shape around every piece at angles which are 3-dimensional. So in shapes that are 3-dimensional. It's not something you can hot wire. You could do that and we actually have seen that from some of our other factory partners. They'll simplify with just hot wired sort of bulkheads. Or flat packs, like a pop wing, for example, would use sort of hot wired parts, but not for something in most of the for example, the Freewing product line. Repair paints, Claudio, thank you for bringing that question up. It comes up every episode. Repair paints, it's hazardous to ship paint, especially considering, guys, we ship to dozens of countries. The regulations are very different. And so the short answer is, 1, we can't ship paint. We can't include it in the box of the airplane. 2, even if we could, you couldn't shoot it out of your airbrush because it's a different formulation. The best we could do is color match, and we are working on that. We're trying to innovate there, but suffice to say, there's a reason why we and sort of the rest of the hobby industry hasn't done that. It's because, again, the cost to do it versus the number of people actually asking for it, it just doesn't really make sense.
Well, like we say, the planes, we do offer some planes with no decals, and the sales of those planes never match the plane that's covered. The gray BA Hawk versus the red one, the gray F-18 versus, it seems like social media exacerbates certain things. If you're somebody who's painting your aircraft, you're more apt to go share pictures of your aircraft on social media. But the majority of people who just buy their basic aircraft, I think a majority of RC pilots aren't following every video, aren't on every social media thing. So for the people that are, it's great, but you get a warped sense of just the reality of, of the numbers, This
isn't bespoke. This isn't ask the chef to change the order. There's a lot of stuff in here, guys. So I'm going to do a quick fire round because I see a bevy of questions here.
Yeah, I have 2 more videos that we haven't shared yet. So
people will stay. I'm going to do a couple of quick answers. Again, I'm trying to be short for time. There's more information in Hobby Squawk, guys. I'm not trying to be terse with you. Just trying to be as quick as possible. So Jansen asking, where's the gear? We're going to show gear a bit. Just stay tuned for that. And thanks for the shout out. Next question here is, could we get a tour of Black Horse models? So Jared. Hi, Jared. Yes, certainly. If you let us know, James every week will post sort of what we're going to be doing later that week on the live episode. We do this every Friday, guys. So come back. Let us know that you want to see us go into Black Horse. We already have the footage, so that's certainly one we could do soon. Merce Sindel asking, where in Australia can you buy Freewing? Currently, I don't know. Yeah, probably.
Would be the
maybe PWRC, Phillip, RC Castle. Unfortunately, I don't know. I wish we could, or that we did in greater amounts.
One day.
One day. Perry, can we incorporate more hard plastic? Again, we could, but there's a function of it's going to get heavier and it's going to get more expensive. It's another mold. So we try and, in a given aircraft, these frame sizes are sort of set. They're sort of like you go to Target, you see different picture frame sizes. They're all sort of 4x6, 5x7, 8x10, etc. We'll look at a given aircraft and say, all right, so we already need to make 2 molds, but it ends up we have 1.5 molds to make. So can we fill the other half with usable plastic parts? Because we're already making the mold. Whether you put 1 part in that mold frame or 10,
get to the prep.
That's sort of the same. So yeah, short answer.
Play this again while you're talking molds. I'm gonna play footage so they're not looking at me.
If it makes sense where we can add more plastic, we do. if adding that extra piece on the leading edge is going to mean I need to make an entirely new mold, no, we can't. The price will jump $20 per plane for a little inch worth of plastic. Where we can, we certainly try and make that happen. In fact, I think we sort of pioneered the amount of leading edge plastic and scrape prevention in the industry. Um, Tony Accurso, hey brother. So he had asked a few minutes ago, do we see 3D printing sort of helping our world? To which I say, yeah, I think so. For 3 years now, we've tried to make our aircraft sort of 3DP friendly. B-24, Tiger Cat, L-39, Mirage, AL-37, F-4. All these aircraft sort of have 3DP parts. We do the same for our Roban and rotor scale line of helicopters. So we see that sort of customer side. There's 3D printing is really an expansive element, I think, that can add a lot to our hobby as individual modelers. On the production side, I don't think we are ever really going to move towards mass producing sort of aircraft, final production aircraft in 3D printing, just because it takes hundreds of hours to make just the aircraft, let alone assembly. And anyway, there are many different reasons why I don't think we're moving that way. What I can say in the context of this video, sort of showing everyone behind the scenes, is that we and other manufacturers and prototypers have used 3D printing for years, like dozens of years. This are 10, 12 or more years at this point, for things like propeller blades. The B-24 was a great example. We were able to 3D print different propellers because they are spinning at a reasonable RPM, and be able to throw them onto the prototype in minutes and be able to compare how the aircraft flew with a 975 by 3x4 or 975x3 by 4.5, etc. So that's where I think 3D printing helps the global hobby in reducing production time, reducing prototyping costs, and all of that's going to reduce the cost of the model. So a couple other questions before we jump on. Yeah, discontinued. That's why we usually don't discontinue stuff, guys. If you can imagine, someone's asking the quantities. I'm never going to tell quantities, but it's six-figure investment. It's $250,000 to get off the ground for an aircraft. Do the math. Like, we're not going to sell 50 of them. You have to keep an aircraft in service. So I'm going to pause here. Thank you everyone for the love. Hi, Neil. And that's why we hope that by the time we make something, it's something that people like and that we can keep in our portfolio for 20 years.
I see the Eurofighter always pops up because that is one and it's just like, nobody mentioned the Eurofighter until it was off the website.
Yeah,
it's really funny how it works. It's like, it's crazy. But it always works that way. So guys, we have, again, 2 more videos. So let's get into what's next. This was the F-14, some electronics bits. So that's the swing plate, right?
Yeah, this is the wing box for the F-14. One of the guys had asked about sort of seeing retracts and whatnot. So all of the EDFs are balanced statically and dynamically. That's an entirely different team. 3 guys in a room, and it's loud in that room. They do that every single day. Fiberglass as well. These are the fiberglass nose cones for F-16 90 mils. These come in. These are little plastic little wingtip,
F-15. Wingtip LEDs.
Yes, that's molded in a different plastic. That's molded in clear plastic. Then it's masked. Then it's painted. All of that for a little plastic wingtip anti damage little bit there. And then we see just a quick shot of other small things. So these minor assembly stations, things like wheel hubs and retract assemblies and the LED wiring, each of these stations or teams are laid out. Again, this is nothing new, guys. Any consumer product you have in your home is going to have a serial production line like this. People are going to specialize in, you sit where you sit and you're the LED guy. You and sort of the group with you, you guys know what to look for, how it should go in, how it should not go in, and the QC centered around LEDs, that's your head to win or die. Other sort of ancillary sub-assemblies we see here, putting retracts into plastic boxes. This is another innovation when we talk about putting more plastic into it that people had asked for, and a quick time lapse showing the suspension people who produce the suspension equipment are different than the teams that do the assemblies. Because again,
Look at the
different.
soldering guy.
Yeah, then the soldering teams, machine soldering these doesn't really make a lot of sense. You can't, you're going to end up eyeballing it to make sure that they're good anyway. So it's quicker just to do it manually. And again, that specialist, all that they do is solder. Um, this is again one of the piles of F-16s, and all of these. This is nylon hinges. Again, the BOM or the bill of materials, guys, on a given aircraft. Again, I like to use the
Well,
A10, the AL-37 as an example. You have hundreds of primary parts, and when you add up all the different stages, it moves into 2,000 sort of operations between the screws and assembling hinges, molding the hinge, creating the hinge, assembling the hinge, installing the hinge. All
I'm gonna
different
let that
stages,
one replay again.
for a hinge. um,
Yeah. I
Michael
see a
Lane's
lot
got
of people asking, one thing asking Alpha, like the time it takes to just say, all right, today I'm making just one plane to go through the whole process. Um, and I would say if anybody's ever just gotten a foam kit with nothing in it, how long did it take you to get everything inside it?
yeah,
Um, they
yeah.
got to do that same thing. It's manual. Like no machine is putting anything into the molds that we just saw come off the mold line. It's just these people are experts at it. They do it faster than you can, at a rate that is, very acceptable as far as, majority of people who pull a Freewing plane out of the box are getting the same experience over and over again, which is a testament to this because there's definitely companies in all the world where, you never get the same thing twice sometimes, and it's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So we hope also not to be an apologist, but anyone who's involved in, frankly, any hobby, I think, should be aware that this is a hobby, right? There's gonna be a time. I'm never gonna say that what we do is perfect. In fact, I'm always gonna emphasize the fact that, I'll take a tenth of a percent of issues, given that hundreds of people have touched a given aircraft. Like, that's as near perfection as we're going to get. We hope that in seeing some of this behind the scenes, guys, we look at what we're doing. I'd like to accomplish it as three goals. One, can we all stop the stigma that what we're flying is a toy made by a child? It's not. It just isn't. It's 2020. It's time to update our sort of our sense of where our products come from. That's the first goal. The second, these are very complex operations. It's no excuse for when something arrives as you don't want it to be. If my iPhone arrives with a crack in it or my airplane arrives with a dent, I'm probably going to call somebody, and you should. Ocean RC, we have our CS team, and they exist to serve you and to take your call. So if something pops up, call them. The third thing, though, is to try and balance those first 2 points, understanding that, I see that there's a bit of overspray on that camo line on my L39, but is it enough for me to say the brand is trash? Or is this something as a modeler I can maybe touch that paint up and just go fly? Recognize that you're the final owner in a very long chain of people who've designed, built, produced that child, that aircraft. And it may sort of sound sing-songy, guys, but I want us all to be glad that we're part of a global operation and recognize that we're essentially stewards of a product that has spent, to answer your question, James, between 18 and 24 months in development, and then we need to produce
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
And by the way, as anyone can probably figure out by now, um, we release multiple aircraft in a given year. So it's not 18 months of doing one aircraft and you stop and you make them all. You make 10 years worth in one week, and then you work on something else. So we have currently dozens of aircraft. We have 2 years of aircraft in various stages of development and then into production. Once a model moves into production, we have everything in production. Any given week, you will have an F-35 an L-39, an A-10, a Flightline Corsair, all of those aircraft will be side by side, or the orchestration to say, the production managers to say, okay, wait, we've got foam coming from this for that aircraft. We have the carbon spars coming in for that aircraft, and you're waiting and you're watching all of those hundreds of parts and those dozens of suppliers, and you're waiting to make sure that you have the material to produce it because you can't produce an aircraft with 99% of the parts, right? You need
Yeah.
100. And so that operation is sort of just a peek of sort of what we're doing back here, guys. So let's jump into the next video. I think,
Yeah, and this will be the last video of today's, tour through this, and we'll get more detailed stuff coming, but this will be the last one. I forget what's actually on here, so let's roll it.
Thanks, Pete, for ordering 2 AV10s. Yeah, so
Nice.
We've taken you through molding, paint, and now electronics. So once that wing has been molded and paint masked and had all the electronics in it and the plastic in it, now we go to component assembly. So here we'll take those retracts and we'll screw them into the fuselage after the plastic retract plates are mounted. The Avanti is a good indication that we're sort of heading towards the decal stage. So the decal team, again, that's all they do. The decal team will then install the decals over the paint. Here's a good look at sort of the sea of aircraft. Sometimes I actually go here and just sit. This is, I have an office a few steps away from the decal bay, and I'll just sit. I love being amongst sort of the fervor of assembling these aircraft. So aircraft that have 0 decals, very easy. Aircraft with complex paint patterns and decals all over them, you can imagine just sort of very difficult. You're right, Terry. We should be able to do a little bit of touch-up. So we move these parts in these large gantries. You'll notice as well that we, like I think anyone in this industry, everything is covered in foam. Every surface has got to be soft. And every surface is cleaned actually every shift, so 3 times a day. And then every other day, all of the foam you see on the tables, they're pulled out and we lay new foam over it. Because again, you want to keep that foam clean, you want to keep it supple to minimize damage and dirt. So a quick time lapse that I shot showing just sort of, these are F-14s going down of decal upon decal upon decal. I'd encourage anyone to take an F-14 and time how long it takes you to put the decals on an F-14. It's a lot.
I did the F-15 and oof.
Yeah. Here's the F-14 wing box into the team that does the F-14s. This is all electronic test assembly. Aircraft is tested for lights and for function and all this sort of stuff. Here's a good shot of the L-39 as well going down. Just, I like decals. Decals.
Yeah, I just love this shot. Like the wide of decals.
Yeah.
Spinny, the no step on the F-15. Just doing the no steps because the majority of the decals already on it was annoying.
Yeah, that's why I left those in the box. Thanks, Paul. You're right. Compassion's the best word for it. We need to be more compassionate for how these models are made. We're stewards, guys. So yeah, a few wide shots just showing one segment of the line. There are different levels to these factories. And this, by the way, is something you can expect from any foam factory. You're going to expect to see just a sea of foam. There are people who, once the mold comes in, as we saw in an earlier clip here, they're foam preppers. All they do is they spot any holes, any defects, any punctures, any dents. They're clipping and sort of trimming the extra splash off of the foam, and then they move into paint, and out of paint they move into electronics or plastic, and then into electronics. After electronics, they move here into decals. And then the nice thing is, each of these teams, some of them will have, obviously the leadership in those teams these are career 40-year-old, 50-year-old, or older gentlemen or women. In fact, some of the more finer work, probably a lot of males on this call, but some of the finer work is actually done by our women. The female team, they're very precise, and most of the decal team are women, and they've done it for an average of sort of 10 or 15 years in other industries. So that's great, but you also need to sort of be training up the new generation. So in the same way that people like Tony Accurso will be at the field with his daughter Evelyn, trying to teach and inspire new people, or Steve is out there with his boys. We try and find people who love what they do, whether it's flying an airplane at the end, like you guys, or I really love applying decals, or I really love painting airplanes, and really try to find influencers in different career paths to train up new generations of people who love doing decals, or who love making molds, or who love EDM machines, or who love different elements of the production line. So this is where I think STEM comes into play and is super important. Paul's asking the hardest, most difficult model to make. I don't know. All of them.
I guess from start to finish, but through the line, I mean, the F-14 seems like it's got more steps to it, but I don't know if anyone would be harder than the last one, because again, these people are trained. Once each person has their step down, what difference does it make? They're rocking and rolling.
It's very intensive. In a given day, the decal team, you'll have a rash of F-14s come in, and then they'll clear those out, and then they'll bring in L-39s, or sometimes we split the team because the paint room is painting 3 different aircraft, and then the decals are doing a couple different other aircraft, and so it's always a cycle, and all of that is pursuant towards this goal. By the time you guys are seeing your Corsair rolling off of the grass, it has already gone. It's already lived again for a sort of a very long time. So
it's incredible.
I like how we sort of put this to see. This is the end. By the time we get it, this is the end of when we pass the aircraft on to you, and hope that it lives, longer than a short maiden
reverse aileron maiden.
Yeah, reverse aileron. You got to check those ailerons.
Put in the battery when it's or put on ordnance and not CG it like me.
Yeah, James. I mean, to take an aircraft that's lived that long and then it lasts a few minutes. That's why things like pre-flight, once we pass it to the end user, things like double checking for dents, maybe fixing some things here or there. Double checking your throws, your CG, your battery, all these things that I think is so easy for us to take for granted. Hopefully a video like this just adds one more voice to, I think I'm probably going to rain check my radio today, because I don't want this
Frank, no.
I would like it to last at least a bit longer than it took to create the darn thing in the first place.
There's Steve's F-18, Steve's F-4.
Steve's F-4, there's the L-39 at Joe Knoll. So
that was Justin Lamb flying that L-39 that day.
Yeah. So we love to see them. By the time you see them, guys, these are well-loved, well-worn aircraft, and the hope is that people can sort of see a bit more behind the scenes. But let us know in the comments. Is any other questions before we close?
Well, I just want to let me run through Hobby Squawk real quick with you, Alpha. I'll let that play for a second. I just want to ask a few of the questions, because I promised the people that if you left a question on Hobby Squawk, I would answer it.
RC Gear Yak 54. The F-86 main retracts are screwed into a plastic plate, but like any aircraft, sometimes you want to double check that glue, and
So one of the questions we had, but I think it got answered through the process of this video. What is automated and what is manually done, and I think you guys can see that a majority of it is manually done.
99% of it is done by hand, guys. The only thing that's done by a machine is when the molds are made or when they're molded, but everything else is by hand.
Yeah,
every single thing.
How much pressure does the molding take? Can you talk into
Yeah,
I guess that's all secret sauce stuff, guys. So I'm just going through a similar note. Amount of hands-on building involved. That's another question from M Shag. So I hope he got his answer. He should have gotten today. Yes, Alpha, do you have an example of an issue with a plane's creation? And maybe like how you had to overcome it. This sounds like a resume question.
Yeah. Yeah, every aircraft at every step has the potential to go wrong. Um, Not just in the development of the aircraft, but in production. We'll make an aircraft for 3 years and they're perfect, and one day the decals show up and they're a bit too dry, or I don't know, the water's too cold, or something happens, or the regulation for the paint we can use has changed, and now we need to change the entire formulation of paint and reorder. And it's not friendly with foam. So at any moment, at any day, suffice to say, most of what I do is putting out fires. Most of what our development team focus on is preempting fires. Preempting fires and putting out fires really ends up taking up the lion's share of a lot of our days. So it's an impossible question to answer except to say yes. Which
Yeah.
problems do we have? Yes, all of them.
And don't we
Um,
all have our own
all
problems in life?
all broils,
That's
yes, of
life.
course. This video will be available at a later time to watch, like all of our episodes for anyone who's listening for the first time. Every Friday at noon Eastern, we're here. Thereafter, the video will then be saved and it'll be published. So you can go back and watch our previous episodes. You can go back to episode 5, which has been referenced a lot in this show. Episode
Yeah.
5 is walking through the paint specific stage. I could talk about each of these stages for hours, in the same way that any of us could talk for hours about all the ins and outs of our specific careers, right? This isn't rocket science, but it's certainly not shaking a box of foam together and ending up with an OB10.
Yeah, and here's a link to our.
F900EX. I'm going to answer a couple of questions here. So
Sure.
F900EX, larger EDFs like 120 millimeter. The advantage of, you mentioned the Black Horse L39 or the Robon A10, the advantage of composite or balsa aircraft is that you don't have molds. So you don't need to sell thousands to break even. You can sort of make a few and test it out. So the short answer is moving into larger EDFs is cost prohibitive. It's also development prohibitive. We're sort of constrained by the size of a mold. There are larger molds available, and there are larger, foam aircraft out in the market. But at that stage, quite frankly, the numbers don't really pan out. And now that we have uh, balsa in ProFly and a
Black
few
Horse.
surprises up to come in Black Horse,
Don't
we
talk
don't
about
really need to make
surprises on the show.
long foam aircraft. Oh, that's right. Um,
Don't mention that, Alpha.
Inertia RC, the David Attenborough style life and death of a plane. That is sort of how this series will end up panning out. Um, let's see. Any other questions? Yeah, new
I was just
schemes
looking
freshening up
through.
the F-86. People have asked about sort of V2s. Again, this is one of those things we do on a rolling basis. Um, there are a few schemes for the F-86 we could do post and Hobby Squawk if that's a model people would really like to see refreshed. We saw a lot of feedback on the ME262, so we did a repower, repaint, and replace on it. We saw some people having feedback for the Mirage, so we did a new scheme and a new repower system on it. Um, so all I can say is the majority of our feedback, guys, that you put into places like Hoppy Squawk are calling to our excellent team with Martin and Wayne and Derek and Andrew and everyone else, Brad, is that we will take that feedback and it lives somewhere. I can't promise you, the gentleman who's asking about an A26, that that's going to come tomorrow, but I can promise you that, you know, we're paying attention.
Yeah.
We're trying to balance what people want with, I hope, more of what you see here, which is all that it takes to do that. You know, making a new color scheme. Okay, I got to go make new masks now. We're going to need to sort of retrain staff, etc. A new aircraft. Do I have a 24-month development slot for a specific airplane? There's a lot of questions in there. William Decker asking about a 1.6 Warbird ETA. Same answer. Always developing new aircraft, and there's probably something at some point in one of the steps that we've shown here. Um, Other questions? F-14 updated power systems. Check the website.
Yeah, I think we covered a majority of what we were hoping to get out of this video today, and it's just to be able to show you guys, some behind the scenes. I think Alpha, he does so much other stuff for even taking a camera and learning about, ISO and everything. I mean, he filmed all that stuff himself that you saw. And then, it's unbelievable. Like, hopefully, Alex and I could get over there one day and, make it look really good. Sorry.
Make it look real.
But no, I mean, I would love to see it. Guys, a lot of footage. Like, we have some other footage on the editing room floor that obviously we can't show, secret sauce type stuff. But, I now know about as much as you guys do as far as how that goes. And it is eye-opening. Obviously, I've been behind the scenes working for hobby companies for a while, so I've heard about this a lot, But it's a lot of work. Any product you make, I mean, anything. Like this, there's a company for this. It's like the people who were talking about the paint. You got to find another factory that makes paint. And, then the bottles. And unbelievable. It's unbelievable the amount of production that happens on planet Earth in a day.
Yeah.
And we're just lucky that people are making these type of things for our sake.
Exactly. Someone had asked about a Bancroft tour. Certainly. We've got a Black Horse tour scheduled. Yeah, Hemlong tanks, Bancroft vessels. I'm pretty excited. Roban helicopters is absolutely something that we could do. So, again, guys, as many people show up on these types of things, there's a bit of effort that goes behind to put on a production like this. So, if and when we see that there are enough people who are interested in this type of content where it makes sense to sort of spend the time, then we'll make it. If it's crickets out there, we won't. But it seems to be that people like this type of stuff. So. Please let us know.
It's just super informative. So, Alpha, thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's late where you are, as usual, doing these 12 afternoon days. I want to thank Todd, Andrew, Wes, our moderators in the chat for helping us today. I know the chat was going pretty crazy. I mean, it's tough when you get this way. And as well as Alex for putting together all those clips. He edited all the stuff. Alpha for shooting it. And I want to thank all of you guys for joining us again on what hopefully is getting closer to the end of this quarantine, and a regular flying season will happen soon.
Any other questions we weren't able to answer, again, jump into Hobby Squawk and let us know, which it's just we were not able to answer all of them now. I see some of them flying by, but post in Hobby Squawk, that's where we tend to spend the most of our time. And we'll try and engage there.
Most threads, or you could stay in the thread dedicated to this show. There is a live show now, main thread that has an individual thread for every show we've done. It's starting out slow because it's only the 15th show that we've been doing, but if you really want to know more about this, Alpha will see those questions in there, and he's on there talking about this stuff all the time. So if you ever want to get real behind the scenes on why decisions are done, you can hear Alpha likes to delve into that, and
in the meantime,
he would happily do it.
Absolutely. In the meantime, spread the word, guys. Your hobby is cool. Your hobby is more than it appears. Spread the word.
Your foamies are more than they appear. A lot of work goes into these things, and thank you guys so much for being customers. Thank you so much again for watching. Hit the like button, please. It's down here, I guess, or it's there. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, share it out, and we'll see you next time at Motion RC. And I'm always looking for my button.